Good afternoon, chicos. What's up, y'all? I hope y'all doing good today. It's a beautiful day. It's getting hot in Europe. I hope wherever you are, you stay hydrated. Hydration, very important, people. So today we're talking about what happened yesterday, because yesterday was the 8th of July and they had the NAFO summit in Ankara, and some comedians were trying to make some jokes. They were trying to make some jokes, folks. Now, I appreciate a good joke. I have no problem. I appreciate comedians. You understand? It's good to have a sense of humor, right? Except comedy has to be grounded in reality, right? So the comedian from Ukraine was at the NAFO summit speaking to the Uber G, the Teflon Don, and they were going back and forth about, a trip to Moscow or something. And the comedian said, oh, it's a bit dangerous to visit Moscow now because of a lot of Ukrainian drones. That is dangerous. And so all of NAFO Fella Twitter just exploded yesterday, and they were all like retweeting, oh my god, all the cards, all the Ukrainian cards, so many cards. In the meantime, ironically, there was another strike from about 20 Iskander missiles on Kiev, more or less at the same time, early in the morning. And when he made those comments, there was a micro district, another one, burning in Kiev. In the meantime, another Novo Posto, the postal, distribution center were destroyed. There were a couple of other targets that were hit, and smoke was billowing. And at the same time, we know for a fact from Ukrainian sources that there were indeed, these depleted uranium shells also stored in that warehouse that was destroyed a couple of days ago, which led to potentially radioactive material maybe being released into the micro district where, all these explosions went off. So you have, I understand comedy, yeah, I'm trying to find a laugh here, but it feels to me that a comedy or jokes that are based in delusion don't really land well. The problem remains that the same person for the last 4.5 years has been on 1,000 or more tours looking for financing, ammo, weapons, donations. It's the same person. Now, I'm not the kind of person who looks down on people who keep asking for help and support, but imagine you were living in a neighborhood and, there's this homeless guy out of no other, better, let's say, comparison. There's this homeless guy who keeps asking you for money, and you're charitable for years, and then you keep giving money, and every time he shows up you keep giving money, and you be like, now at some point, I guess, if you were a normal person, you would come to the realization, like, man, I understand that this guy needs some help, the homeless guy. And I understand that I like to give him some change because, okay, it's not nice to see somebody homeless, and it's not nice to see somebody constantly seeking help. It's nice to be charitable. Let's help this person. But then, how long does it go on till one day you realize that, man, get your ass up and get a job? Stop it. You know what I mean? You would think, bro, I just gave you every day for the last 5 years a lot of money. How about this? You get off the street and get yourself a job, right? Isn't that a charitable thing to do? Instead of being the guy who constantly throws out money at homeless people. Right? I mean, at some point you have to think, like, yeah, enough is enough, right? But apparently that hasn't dawned yet on our European leaders. Right? So people keep showing up at different events. People keep showing up asking for money. And, well, I get it. They're having a tough time. They need the money. And I get it. Europe wants to support them. I get it. I sympathize with you. It's a terrible thing. But how long does one need to support the delusions of that person too? Because the delusions are real. Never mind the fact that a part of Kiev potentially has radioactive contamination on the ground. Never mind the fact that there continues to be increased level of intelligence on more upcoming mass strikes from Russia. How delusional does one have to be? And yes, war is always dangerous. The war is always getting worse. More tankers were destroyed by the Ukrainian side on the Sea of Azov. Now, that only means that the Russians, whatever they're doing, need to up their game, right? I mean, do you see the Russians, however, panicking? I'm not talking about the odd social media posts of Russians complaining about not enough gas in certain gas stations in certain regions in Russia. I get it, there are some shortages. Now, sure, there are some refineries that have been attacked. Now, do I see a long-term issue with that? Not really. It's a temporary problem. The Russians have evolved enormously in the last 5 years to most challenges that are thrown their way. Do they have losses? Sure. Do they have infantry losses? Sure. Do they have vehicle losses? Yeah, absolutely. But what is the end goal here? If the end goal is that we continue in Europe to give out billions and billions, they'll say, oh, the cost of killing a Russian soldier is down to less than $1,000 or something. They make these kind of statistics. I think Magyar, or one of these, drone units from Ukraine, said the cost of killing a Russian soldier is now less than $500. Yeah, but bro, you're not looking at the total cost. You're looking at the cost of the drone, but the fact is, for the last 5 years, the West has shelled out close to $500 billion in ammo, arms, donations, direct funds. And when you account for all that, you're looking at essentially the cost of a Russian KIA to be between $2.5 to $3 million because of, 300,000 Russians KIA or so. So the cost is extremely high. And what else is the cost? The human expense. Look at the human expense. There was this video coming out from Lviv this morning where an entire bunch of people were beating up the mobilization forces, the Tzaka as they call them in Ukraine. And they were beating them up on the streets in Lviv with a large group of people who want nothing to do with being forced to fight a war they really don't want to fight. So there seems to be a mass disconnect in Ukraine. There seems to be a mass disconnect in what to do going forward when it comes to Ukraine and the war. Shut up.
No results were found.
So it's a fool's errand to continue fighting this war. This war is bringing more death and devastation to Ukraine. This war will continue to exhaust Ukrainian manpower. And that will continue to happen as long as they do not settle this internally first. This is at first, and always has been at first, and foremost importantly, a civil war that has escalated beyond its borders between ethnic Russians and so-called, Ukrainians. But are the Ukrainians really into it? Are the Ukrainians, what is the national sport in Ukraine right now? It's not gymnastics. It's running from the Tesaka. It's running from mobilization forces. That is your national sport in Ukraine. That's the male national sport. What will be the female national? Are we coming to a point where women have to be mobilized, folks? Are we coming to a point in Ukraine where it's utterly disgusting that women have to be sent to die in a battlefield? It's disgusting. It's not that women cannot fight. It's not that women don't belong in the armed forces or something. They are more than welcome to play support roles, but active combat roles, really? Do we need that? Do we get to a point where Ukraine must really send their women out to die? You already have the worst demographics of any modern state. I mean, the demographic decline of Ukraine has been terrible. Now, do we further want that women are being forcefully mobilized to die so that they can join NATO or something? And Mr. Comedian over there went out and said, we need to belong in NATO. Mr. Stub, the useless person from Finland, was saying, if it were up to me, Ukraine would already have been in NATO. Which means if it were up to him, he would have already been destroyed. Which means, understand this, the moment Ukraine joins NATO, there is a war. You know that, right? And you cannot, it's even in the NATO articles, one of the articles, go look it up. It basically says you cannot join NATO if you have an active conflict going on. So I don't know what pipe dream world these people live in. Comedians with delusions. That's not comedy. It's low resolution thinking. And anybody who thinks that a NATO-Russia war will be, it's easy, man, we will just do deep strikes into Russia. Good luck, huh? Deep strikes into Russia. You do know that, about pretty much every European capital, every nuclear base, every major air base in Europe is firmly within range of the Oreshnik, which has so far never been tested with a real combat live warhead. It's always been tested with empty, tungsten shells or whatever. You do know that these weapons can reach every part of Europe, and I think the maximum flight time is about 17 minutes. Okay, that's for the farthest targets if they were to be launched from, within Russia. You do know that pretty much every major capital within Europe is within strike range. Okay, they don't need a vast number of fighter aircraft to penetrate your air defense or something. They just need a vast number of missiles. And if Iran on day one could hit deep targets in Bahrain with ballistic missiles, destroy all kinds of air defense stuff. They were just using basic drones and some basic ballistic missiles. We're talking about Russia here. Their ballistic missiles don't miss. They hardly ever miss. They more or less have a 90% accuracy. They hit their targets more or less 90% of the time without failing, unless they're intercepted. The Zircon doesn't miss, okay? The Kinjal doesn't miss. Okay. Despite the fake Ukrainian claims that the Kinjal has been shut down, there's absolutely no evidence, no real evidence. Some fake warhead pictures and that look nothing like the Kinjal. They post it and they pretend like the Kinjal has been shut down. Are you crazy? And first of all, you don't see a Kinjal coming because it's flying so fast. We've seen footages of the impacts from Kinjals. Yeah, no. You don't see the terminal velocity. It's not something like, oh, I see the missile landing. No. They fly a very flat trajectory, or they fly, they land from up top. Like they did early in the days in Kiev. But later, the Russians found a way to just use flatter trajectories, and the terminal velocity is so fast you don't see it. Okay. All you see is the ruin after. So these kind of weapons can reach all parts of Europe. And are we then gambling that we're going to somehow deal with them? Because when you have a 90% chance of hitting something, they will hit a lot of targets. All they need is a large arsenal of missiles. And a lot of these missiles would be very deep in Russia. And you may think, oh, look at their refineries. They can't even defend their refineries. But the Russians, for the most part, have always used their air defense to protect civilian areas. Major towns, major cities. There are some point defense nodes near key facilities, but they remain point defense nodes. And if you overwhelm them, it's possible to get through. But sure, the Iskander factory was hit a couple of months ago. Has anything changed? The Iskander continues to be used quite frequently. Nothing has changed because there are many factories. They have many such locations from where they can build them. They can easily, and they have reliable, proven technology. In the meantime, the Ukrainians, again, have a hodgepodge of weaponry. They have a lot of their own local drones, mostly putting together cheap parts from China, right? And then they fight. That's it. The Russians do the same. They got a lot of cheap parts from India, China. They put it together. They get some chips from different parts of the world, some, AI chips, and then they put it, and, there's nothing new about this. It's just the scale of things. This is the scale of destruction that the Russians can bring forth is vastly superior. It always has been, since day one. So this superiority will continue on the battlefield, will continue to be demonstrated, because there's another major strike expected, and these will land heavy blows. And sure, there is a cost to Russia. The Russians, chose this escalation, was an escalation choice. So the Russians, like the realists they are, understand that there will always be new dynamics on a combat. The Russians have always had far more discipline towards their objectives than the Ukrainians have. The Russians are far more doctrinally, aligned with their execution of the said doctrine, okay? Meanwhile, Ukraine's, their only strategy is to do some minor counteroffensives, do social media victories, try to do these stunts like in Krinky and in Kursk, to try to gain media attention, like okay, look, we set a refinery in Russia in fire or something. You do know that major oil producers also import oil. It's Russia is not cut off by any means. Russia will continue to buy oil. If you try to shut down the Sea of Azov, they will get it from the other side. It's even faster. From the other side, the other side, the Northern Sea route, which is pretty much fully open right now. They can stock up on huge amounts of gasoline, oil. Yeah, and sure, there are some short-term issues that happen here and there in Crimea. Okay, some trucks are destroyed. But are you waiting that the Russians are just gonna let it go? Like, oh my God, hello, they destroyed some trucks. We are now going to sit back. Why is a Russian sounding like an Indian? But okay. Давай, хорошо, блядь. We have to leave Crimea because they destroyed some trucks. How asinine is that? I mean, that is a major asinine assumption. And it's also an extremely naive way of thinking to say, okay, we're just going to walk to Crimea. You are not doing that. Who are you going to do that with? We do know from just Googling and basic search, we know that there are at least 310,000 criminal cases of desertion, people going AWOL, running for mobilization in Ukraine. That is just a registered number of cases. And for these kind of cases, it's always, you like KIA notices, like death notices, there's always a lag in that information. So that number could easily be up to 350, 400,000 soldiers who have already deserted and are running AWOL in Ukraine. And you're expecting that somehow Ukraine is going to just win if they... No. You put this to a vote today. If Ukraine is allowed to vote an honest election, which I don't know if it will happen, but if an honest election can be arranged in Ukraine with a 1-week ceasefire, I think the vast majority of Ukrainians will just vote to give up that land at this point. Well, I think so. Keep in mind, those 4 regions already, as far as the Russians are concerned, they already voted to leave. So they're already, as far as Russians are concerned, they're already part of Russia. So the Zaporizhia, Kherson, the other 2 regions. That is it. So Ukraine continues to lie to itself. I said this again, but it's like I have to tell it again every day. The lies continue. The delusions continue. Oh, it's dangerous to go to Moscow. Well, it's far more dangerous to go to Ukraine. A Swedish person was visiting, or Swedish or Danish, I don't know. I saw this, it was on Twitter this morning, that a Swedish person went to Ukraine and the mobilization forces ended up, dragging him off the streets. They didn't know. They thought he was Ukrainian. Well, what are we doing? What are we doing? It's very, there are a lot of channels on YouTube where you have Englishmen in Russia, You have Chinese men in Russia. You have Scottish men in Russia. All these guys who are living there, different parts, different Europeans who make videos from Russia. And none of them have been drafted, just so you know. Well, Angelina Jolie's bodyguard, right, was escorting her last time she was around in Kiev, and he got drafted. He got pulled aside. That's the reality in Ukraine. You know, no amount of, you know, self-soothing, you know, thought process. And you know, the NAFO Fellas do this every day. They'll use the Grok and go, Grok, make me an AI image of Moscow burning. And they'll post this, you know, AI slop and expect you to think that, oh my God, yeah, look, Russians are dying or something, or Moscow is going to be burned, and you know, we'll take back Crimea. Summer in Crimea. Remember that? Delusion is a powerful thing, folks. You can lie to yourself to a point of delusion, and that's the problem that many face. And the more people, you know, have their little bubbles, their little, you know, fella groups, the more they're isolated and in their bubbles and
Police reported ahead.
Incoherent at the same time. And none of the NAFO fellas, you know, there are a lot of NAFO fellas out there. None of the NAFO fellas, it's always, oh, we need to support Ukraine. We're going to do fundraisers for Ukraine. We're going to help to buy drones for Ukraine. You know, they do all this stuff. They do all these things, right, to keep themselves, you know, active, you know, participating in this whole thing. It's kind of sad because they are never the ones to go volunteer to fight in Ukraine. And those who volunteer to go fight in Ukraine, like the Colombians or the Polish and some Brits and Americans, most of them either run away. If there are some people left, they get, you know, KIA'd. If they're caught, they're in Russian gulags. The NAFO Fellas, you know, my highest recommendation to NAFO Fellas is like, guys, you are welcome. Ukraine is a free country, apparently. Go free, go and see for yourself. If you really want that Russia is your enemy, and if you're openly calling for its destruction, you have an outlet. It's called Ukraine. Go and find out for yourself. No, but they don't have the cojones, as they say in Spanish. Beautiful word. You know, they do not have the cojones. They are good to make a lot of noise. You know, oh, Russia this, orcs, Russian that. You know, a lot of thoughts, a lot of prayers, thoughts, but never action. Like, you know, yeah, show up, man. Show up and see when you come. You know. So they'll do a lot of this stuff. They will do a lot of, you know, they spend a lot of time trying to convince themselves that it's all gravy in Ukraine, but most of the time they're living in delusion.